A very good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much for joining us here on the Citizens Chat Show, streaming on YouTube at Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim. Always a pleasure to have you join us. Today we are talking about the flawed census exercise in Uganda, the expulsion by the Uganda Law Society of the AttorneyGeneral, and the impeachment of Kenya's Deputy President. Joining me to have this conversation are my four all-male panelists for today. From my immediate left is Dr. Robert Ojambo, head of the History Department at Kyambogo University. Good afternoon, Dr. Ojambo, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, and thank you.
Next to Dr. Ojambo is Ambassador Honorable Simon Mulongo, former Special Representative of the AU to Somalia. He's also a former Member of Parliament. Good afternoon, Ambassador.
Hello there, our good viewers and listeners.
Good to have you.
Thank you so much. And nice to be here as well and seeing you again.
Okay, good to see you. It's been a while, yes. Also, next to Honorable Mulongo is Mr. Joseph Othieno, social and political commentator and UPC Ideologue. Joseph, good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to be here. Sad, the kind of stuff we're discussing. Nice to be flanked by my good brother Simon, and neighbors at home. We had land disputes in the past that we sorted, but the fact that he's flanking me next to another NRA person means that I'm really quite squeezed. But they're fantastic colleagues of mine.
But despite of being NRA, he's a nice guy.
Oh, but that's fantastic. When I say this,
I'm happy to hear that.
and fantastic brethren. But that said, as UPC, I'm very saddened that we are all male panel, but delighted that you're giving us the warmth as the lady.
Thank you.
Host.
But also I'm delighted that this is beyond the River Nile, so we can call it on.
and of course, last but not least, is also your other fantastic brother, retired Major Awich Pollar, lawyer and director for external relations at the NRM. Good afternoon, Major, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, good afternoon and greetings to the viewers. Nice to be here. Somebody mentioned about fantastic NRM. They were really fantastic. Very honest, I told Parliament the other day when we were appearing before Committee on Legal and we submitted opposing the bill to elect a leader of opposition. They were shocked. And I told them that in NRM, what we speak during the day is what we speak at night. So don't be surprised that we are fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So
You have added yourself there.
I actually think Major is a fantastic human being.
True.
So, gentlemen, thank you very much to have you here. So, of course, let's start our conversation this afternoon from the census results that have been quite a controversial and interesting topic playing out in both the mainstream and also in our digital and spaces, and also in private physical conversations that people are having. First, there was the issue of misrepresenting figures for tribes. And then later, in the last few days, we are seeing also special interest groups like the Persons with Disabilities coming up to also raise concerns about the flags, about the figures. Because at first, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics said they had actually misrepresented the figures by using 2014 data for the 2024 census. That is for the tribes, the Wagisu, the Langi, and the Acholi, and so on, and the Bachiga as well. Of course, there are lots of concerns, but what comes to your mind first? But also, what lessons do we draw from these kinds of misrepresentations, and how can things be done better? Let me start with you, Dr. Ojambo.
Yeah, we were here during that process of census, and many of us saw this coming. Yeah, you see, the country has a lot of challenges. We may lift a stick and start caning the guys at the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. But this is a sign of a big problem in the country. Problem number one, and which I raised last time, is as if we don't have a system in the country. Because you see, to get a real statistics of a given population with all its characteristics, you need a lot of things. You don't just do a one-off. We have hospitals where children are born every second. We have institutions where people register their citizenship. We have schools where children register. You have so many places where data is collected. But unfortunately, this data is not connected to any central point for use, for national use. That is problem number one. Problem number two, which I saw with our census for this year. This census, in my view, looked like it aimed at confirming something. We had certain results. You know, sometimes I tell my students that data is like a detainee in a torture house. If in Uganda here we have a good history of torture houses. You know, when you are a suspect or a detainee in the torture house, you are tortured until you tell what the one who is torturing you want to hear as the truth. Did you kill the man? They torture you until you say, yeah, indeed, I am the one who killed at 10. So data is like that, especially if you want to use data wrongly. You torture the data to give you what you want to say or what you want to hear. And unfortunately, you get up with the wrong things and you are amazed. The character of the appointing authority, let's look at that just briefly. You have seen times when we have had census, because this is not the first census we are having. We had one in 2014, we had one in 2004, we had another one before that, and very many, 2002, and many others. And they were not like this. You know, this census came at a time when we were chasing to join a middle income. The first news was that we had already joined. When that was later corrected, they said we are somewhere there. We are almost joining. Then later we joined. And when we joined, nobody believed that we had joined. So you had to get some data to confirm that. And for that purpose, that's why you see there is a lot of problems. Because in my view, even right now, continuing to look for data that puts people in ethnic groupings is something that if I were to advise would drop that thing. Because if they ask my daughter of their ethnicity, you may not get the right answer. Because my daughter is a product of a person who originates from Busia, was born and raised in Jinja, married a person from Unyangabo, and the children are produced in Mulongo. So those children, if you ask them, and some of them are now above 18, they are on their own, they may, if by choice they can give you the one of the mother. If they are not happy, they can give you the one of Kampala, because they always tell me that for the other place is my village. For them, they are from Kampala. They can give you the same, can give you from Busoga, because that's where my father and my grandfather were. So it becomes very difficult. So we need, does that really help us? What does that ethnic grading thing help us? Does it help in development? What does it help? I don't know. Other than the heritage, and if you would want those things. Okay. So secondly, and the last, thirdly, the last one. You have 30
seconds. Yeah, I've given you 5 minutes already.
The last one is that you saw how shambolic those guys were organized. 2 days they would not start. The gadgets are problematic. So there is no way you would expect a shambolic system to give you definite data. Those are my three.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mulongo, let's hear your thoughts. And Dr. Ojambo here raises a critical question, of course, of data manipulation and how this can actually be done to suit a certain agenda or interest. And that's also the kind of concern Ugandans are having. If we are having, yes, Ubos admits that it was done erroneously. But we also see that in certain instances, this could actually be used to suit a certain agenda. I'm not saying that is our case here. But I'd like to hear your thoughts, Honorable.
Thank you so much. If I'm going to take on a very brilliant professor of history who remembers almost every fact and issues in the past, I do it at the risk of contradiction. But to me, the day the results were announced, the next day we were on some local radio forum, and I criticized the numbers because the first thing I saw was my ethnic community, Bamasaba, who were miscalled Bagishu. And I insisted that certain factors and drivers population growth could not have been reversed, given that Bamasaba are well known in terms of high fertility rates. And, we cannot be undermined in that way. There's no way, any circumstances.
Seconded.
Given the altitude, very high altitude, the cold weather, and the hard work that these people exhibit, both in economic areas and social areas, there is no way. But a joke aside, the issue is that for us to recede in population growth rate, there must be some very serious circumstances. Most of the developing economies have such clear drivers that if it actually receded, it would call for special research to know what it is. It is those communities that are developed economies, people have become so much individualistic, who are more prone to money making other than socializing, that can have such kind of receding population numbers. Not us in Africa, and mainly, say, Uganda and particularly Bamasawa. I cannot agree. And that same goes to the Bakiga, the Acholi, the Lango, and all this, which I think it was a misrepresentation. I made some frantic attempts to call the UBOS leaders, but they did not take my calls. Later on, I realized that even removed the publication on their website. And then, of course, it was followed by an acknowledgement saying that these some errors, some of which included interposing the numbers, particularly of ethnic groups, but also could go for other sectors, housing, age groups, and all that. It's possibility that there's mix-ups. So I think, to me, do I condemn them? First of all, I condemn them for initially misrepresenting a number of populations. I don't know who else, whether even the Baganda or Banyankole were correctly represented by the numbers. But on the other hand, I don't think we should condemn them to the gallows, because they admitted, they said, yes, we acknowledge the errors, and they apologized and said that we give them some moments into which they will come back with their correct figures. So to me, and given that somebody has a history, because in the courts of law, and the major will tell us, if you're the first offender, you've never offended before, then you're likely to attract leniency from the judges. And that's how I like my professor to be lenient to the first offenders. He has acknowledged, and is a witness to the fact that they have never miscalculated before, they have never had such absurdities before, and he said all along it was perfect. So now he bears witness that they have been very good workers. I have no doubt about the material capabilities of the leadership and management of UBOS. I know some senior colleagues there who are like the executive director and other heads of program. So the point I want to reiterate is the fact that if somebody is in an error and admits and apologizes and promises to correct the same, then morally and even legally, so to say, there is no ground for us to still condemn the same person to the gallows. And I think that UBOS deserve another chance from the public court. And I want to say that I represent that court together with my professor, who has attested the fact that along all the history of UBOS, nothing like that has ever happened before. And I want to support him on that. The other issue is the leadership and management of UBOS are very competent professionals, people with several letters after their names and also several years after their in their experience. And as such, to me, error knows no competency. Even the best professional can err. And as such, we can condemn them, but with reservations. And also, you know, the Baganda have a saying, who are the imperialists in my area, that who hits one's own hits with softness. So for that matter, really, I think let's not hit them very hard. After all, we're awaiting the outcome of the reviewed results. Having said that, do we think there was an agenda being pursued? To me, is clearly no, because the UBOS we're talking about is one of the agencies of government. There's no the government can run away from its own shadow, because the objectives that we set for ourselves as government, or the ruling party for that matter, that has lasted extremely many years, I don't want to compare with anybody else, but we know what you're talking about, is that we want to have accurate scientific data for not just planning purposes and development, but also for those who are doing research and academics, to rely on policymakers and so on, to rely on factual information, to be able to plan and execute their development programs accordingly. So if there's no way we can be cheating ourselves, actually that will be cheating ourselves. If you recall right from the beginning, our basis of statistics have never been challenged. I know some people come up with the counter arguments, but they don't provide us with counter statistics numbers. So I want to say that the government has no other agenda. Our agenda is simple and clear: to have proper data, proper statistics against which we can do our policy activities and governance programs. So I know that the middle income that my good colleagues and friend and neighbor is talking about is that the middle income class, yes, it was declared much earlier, but then it was the realization that this was not ready stuff yet until when it was properly confirmed. That's when it was announced finally, and it is there.
Thank you. Joseph, let's hear your thoughts. And I'm sure it's a little contrarian to what he says.
Absolutely, but I must say that...
But for once, you can concur.
Simon is... For me, you know, one thing I've told Ugandans is that the day Mr. Museveni does something right, yeah, I will say it. And a number of friends, including Simon and I, have joked a few places. And Comrade Awich has attempted, and the prayer continues. You know, I just find it very hard in the last 40 years to find a single item on which I can credit this regime.
Security.
And one, security, when we have dozens of our young people in concentration camps and some in go down.
Additional cement factories in Tororo, madam.
Know,
additional cement factories in Tororo.
There is an extra cement factory in Tororo, but Tororo was the second largest industrial town in this country. It's now a slum.
Not Ginger?
And in any case, Ginger was the leading industrial capital. In fact, our UPC well strategically designed industrial towns in this country. And in any case, the skyscrapers in apartheid in South Africa were built under apartheid, and in no way does that justify apartheid. But look, I actually think that what has happened with the census is more than what we are ordinarily taking. I think it's a resignation matter. I think the head of UBOS, who I happen to have become friendly with as a result of this, should have resigned immediately, and a number of his staff should have resigned. There must be a thorough investigation about what happened. UBOS took hundreds of billions of our shillings, a huge amount of money, one of the biggest national operations, and it shouldn't stop there. The ministry responsible for UBOS, some ministers should take responsibility, including public officials there. And in any case, Simon, unfortunately, while I was trying to suggest that you might have been the best spokesperson for UBOS, because I think your presentation has been the best attempt, actually, by both UBOS and government on this. And I'm just saying generally fairly, because we attempted to make the case for it. But unfortunately, it's still below the threshold of fact. Because in any case, as I say, UBOS guys themselves say that apparently the figures were wrong as of 2014 census. So if true, that is not only criminal, it's not only a national crisis, but in terms of national security implications, it's huge. It means we have been planning for the last 10 years, planning on false figures. So if this is not a resignation matter, what is? It should not really mean that we should be going to museum. It means, Simon, that as you seem to suggest, on the contrary, that the middle income nonsense that Mr. Museveni suggested, we can for once forgive him that he was misled by facts and figures, because statistically these things come from national statisticians, they will come from national planning agencies, and the figures don't come from anywhere else but accumulation of some of the information that would otherwise have been picked by the census. And although I totally agree with you also that I was saddened to realize that making an allegation that the Bagisu, who are not only my neighbors but also my relatives, and where I was threatening to ensure that I make a net contribution, to social emancipation in that community, and still a possibility going forward, that there was a retardation in terms of population. Just to contextualize, Simon said it, and I agree with you, that population reduction in population would only happen in very, very, very rare cases, and with the exception of countries like Japan, a few communities in Western Europe, and a few communities in North America is not a common thing at all, and partly for the economics and partly for the social strata, but not in developing economies, let alone Uganda, where the population growth rate per annum is amongst the highest in the world. But there is something else. The context of incompetence is really scary. That you can actually come out with the figures for census and get it so wrong, and there is no average statistician, forget about senior guys, no average statistician, no average economist, and possibly actually even no average editor for this documentation at initial stages as they're preparing to release these figures. And nobody spots these differences, begins to ask the question.
Quality control issues of yes.
It tells you the extent of incompetence, impunity, and indifference that operates in this country. As I said, once again, it's actually shockingly criminal. And so when I look back, Judith, and look at your camera persons and the guys who push your programs here, and I thank them, and they're predominantly young people, their futures are permanently and continuously being put on the spot, but hugely at risk. So it is sad what happened. I just say that I am shocked by the arrogance by the head of UBOS, not only to say that he's the best decision we have, but also to dare Ugandans. Quite an insult. Suggest that wish you good luck if you're asking for my resignation. I am the best because there's nobody else to replace me. Mm-hmm. That is an indictment actually on this regime that after 40 years, an important government agency like that does not have people. Meaning just that, like Museveni, if Museveni falls sick tomorrow, nobody is in charge of our nation state, and if the head of UBOS, gets fever, and fails to get medicine in Mulongo Hospital, which he will fail, because on the basis of this failure to provide the necessary information, these figures are for planning. So if he's not able to do that, it means that the organization closes. It's a terrible ringing indictment, and so no, it's a shame.
Okay, thank you. Your time is also up. Your fantastic brother, Major. Could we hear from you? I know he's not going to depart so much further from what
No, he will
his
confirm
colleague,
with
Honorable,
your neighbors here.
has said. May I just hear from you, please?
I can depart from my brother ambassador, because for us in NRM, we have objective truth, and we share it, and more so, if we were in our room alone, we would speak even more objectively than now that we are mixed. And that is a critical discussion we always have. And we speak the truth, and I earlier on alluded to the example of us seeing a bill in parliament to elect a leader of opposition, and we appeared before parliament just immediate after NUP. And I know the pro-NUP MPs had arsenal to wait for us to fight us. I know Honorable Nwagawa had a lot of arsenal for us, but when we appeared in our objectivity, all the arsenal was rendered useless. They had nothing to fight with, the weapons that they had carried. That is to testify the objectivity. So it wouldn't surprise if I differed with my brother anyway. But census is a periodic exercise taken in a country to ascertain the national statistics in the country. So it is an objective exercise which is done without manipulation. So that is what a census is. Now, I therefore like to comment on the professor's conspiracy theory, where he believes something must have happened like this because of that, and then it must have been triggered like this. No. Census is an objective exercise that happens, and government has no intention of falsifying. If government wanted to falsify, it was a matter of having the entire result and saying 30% is above or below poverty line. You said, no, you change that to 20. And it wouldn't cause all this. So you just do that. You just say, we want to be sure that fewer population are below or above poverty line. So it wouldn't do this, but there's no intention, because the revolutionary methods of work of NRM is to get the truth and look for a medicine. If indeed people are poor, we look for the medicine. So we want it that way. So I like to say that don't be taken by your imagination of conspiracy that there was something. There is nothing. We just have to ascertain, we wanted to ascertain the facts and deal with it. Therefore, whatever happened is the competency of the persons that are put in office. And I like to say this. When the Kitezi incident happened, we were here, we came here. And I told you guys here that President Museveni will always not rush with a reaction. He will study this on its own merit. I even promised that if something is wrong in the competency, there will be a serious reprimand. And I was set free when indeed they were removed from their job and are being followed by the law to date. And that being good news, Professor doesn't want to mention it, that the government can actually competently follow a matter and act on it. I thought you were going to welcome me with that news. Therefore, if there's a question of competency in this matter, even at the risk of sounding contradicting with my brother, the ambassador, serious reprimand will be taken. If it is the, and that's the same thing that happened with the Kitezi, the rubbish, the field place. Therefore, if government places resources to your disposal in billions of shillings, and government had set processes for the recruitment for you to access that office, and you ostensibly looked like you were competent, and you cannot do the job. And the mishaps nearly leads to a collapse or a failure of this important exercise, then you will have to be responsible. And as I said, President Museveni takes time. He will definitely ask the line minister. He will definitely find out, is this a human error? Is this incompetence? Is this an omission? Was there deliberate intrigue? And serious reprimand will be taken. If it is normal error, it will be handled as such. But I assured you, you people during the Kitezi thing, that no number of people can die like this and nothing will happen. Because eventually for us at the party level, we have the mandate for the 5 years. We have a social contract with the people for 5 years in our manifesto. There's nothing under the sun in Uganda that the manifesto does not cover. You promise to protect their lives. We promise to protect their property. Please vote for us. And they voted for you. So we can't run away from this. Government is an agent of the party. We are the principal. We are the one who signed the contract with the people. Government is the agent. So we look at this with keen eye. And therefore the good thing is that the party chairman is also the head of the executive. So leave the UBO thing. Everything will be done. It's too early. But they should have done better than that. It is shameful to say you have changed figures for Bagisu, for Bateso, then shifted Bateso, for this and that, with all the resources at your disposal. That is not correct. So wait and we see what happens. The other issue is the issue of ethnicity. True, some jurisdiction abolish it. Here in Rwanda, in the past, it used to have identity card which would state you're a Tutsi or a Hutu. I happen to have presided over a United Nations body, a world body which oversees states' human rights. So we would ask for data. But we came across many countries which had abolished ethnicity identification. But in Uganda, we still have it. Because in the constitution, or maybe even subsequent laws, I'm not so sure, a good lawyer is not the one who crams, but knows where to get it. But in our laws, whether parent law or legislative law, municipal law, we have a provision for Equal Opportunity Commission. Mm-hmm. Now the gist and the method of Equal Opportunity Commission is that it sees that under third schedule of our constitution, indigenous communities enlisted under third schedule of the constitution. Therefore, Equal Opportunity Commission wants to know data, whether there is fairness, whether other communities are more employed or other communities are less educated, so that it is addressed. And that is the constitutional mandate of Equal Opportunity Commission. Maybe at some stage, if we grew and find that we have amalgamated to the extent that ethnicity identities is retrogressive, then we shall be there. But for now, the Equal Opportunity Commission demands that societies are looked at as in third schedule, so that you see how to remedy. In other words, ethnicity is still there with a positive outlook, not negative outlook. If you bundle them together, time will come when other communities are actually benefiting and others are not. Because you have not had the time to count. You have not had the time to have a disaggregated data. Otherwise, if you mix them up together, maybe there would even be no need to count women apart from men. Said, why are you counting women and men? These are all human beings. Just count them. But we want to know a disaggregated data as to what affects the women gender. Are they going to school? Are they not? And what affects the male gender? Are they favored? Are they going to school or not? So ethnicity, I would think for now, considering third schedule of the constitution, which lists 56 ethnicity, we still hold it just as a tool for redress, not as a tool for negativity. Therefore, this issue of census, I was embarrassed, and I'm sure government is embarrassed, but it is still work in progress.
both to ascertain the cause of this and the degree of effect. Is it completely a total collapse? The system, the exercise collapsed, or the exercise succeeded, but with these errors that was manifested?
Thank you very much. And hearing your first submission in line with the ethnic groups whose data were switched, I think I can read between the lines of where this is heading. If there's culpability for, if someone is found culpable for, say, not doing their job, I'm sure we shall also see where this actually heads. But I want to come back to you, Robert. Of course, when we talk about a census, it's a complete head count, and unlike a survey where you can estimate, you don't expect that the margin of error would, for instance, be so big. At least you expect that everyone is going to be counted. But when you meet people, well, I don't know about the rest of you. Personally, I wasn't counted, and I think in my neighborhood there are probably more than hundreds of people who were not counted just here in Kampala. When I call my friends, it's the same conversation.
Counted,
You weren't counted either. So, and when I have conversations with people many times, that were you counted? It keeps on coming up and up again. Where I stay, we actually had 2 enumerators. And they could not even count us because they had been allocated duties elsewhere. And 2 days prior, their gadgets were withdrawn already from them. And we told them, but we've not been counted. And so many people here haven't been counted. When it comes to now the accuracy of the data and the integrity of this census, we're talking about planning and how everyone should actually be included. And I'm glad you mentioned something about the security aspect of this, which I think I would like us to also talk about a little more later. Robert, I just want to pick your thoughts.
If you don't mind, I just want to add something on to what Comrade Witt
Okay,
and to delight that Comrade Witt, you'll be very delighted now that you're backed by Simon that I'm agreeing with you on something. You know, and it's important.
Thank you.
As a matter of national interest. On the question of identity, the concerns being raised about this to the extent that people are saying that possibly we should no longer apply them. I can actually see because of the absence of confidence. But generally, actually, as a matter of from a national planning perspective, even actually social anthropologists, they possibly would argue against it. There is absolutely no reason why we should stop counting identities and communities. Actually, it's in the national interest. It's the interest of all these communities. And now that actually we have these new situations where even my Republican Padola, we now have people who call themselves the royal kingdoms and things like that. It's actually important. So it's not a problem. And so I totally agree with Comrade Awich. The only problem, as I said, is because of the manner in which the whole thing has been handled, means that people begin to push suspicions and to put and question now.
Why is the data? Why are the figures being manipulated?
Said,
what's the agenda?
And what is the issue with our community? So actually, some of my colleagues from the neighborhood in the Bamasaba, the issue was what are they up to? Yesterday, the day before, I was in a national program, related program, with a national figure who's actually a part of NRM, but someone who's politically very interesting, and is actually trying to say that, look, maybe if the figures had touched Uganda, we'd be having a slightly different conversation. And so there are people who've been saying that maybe actually, whereas we might actually want to dismiss the figures, that actually manipulating these figures serves certain political interests. But maybe that is the state in which we are as a country, where we no longer trust our institutions, we no longer trust our leaders, we no longer trust politics, we no longer trust politicians across the political divide, which is possibly not particularly good. But final thing, though, that on the census thing, whereas we are talking about the figures for 2014, no, the post-independence census for 1969, was perfectly done. Even Simon, even in 1980, after 9 years of Idi Amin, and 1980s amidst the interim administrations, we had census, and it was successfully conducted within a very short period of time, and it was not disputed. So what is it that is happening now, 40 years later? But anyway,
Thank you.
45
Thank you.
Judith, when you are being treated, we started off the cameras with the story of madness. When you are being treated of madness, the only time they get to know that you are improving is when you accept that you are mad. When somebody starts accepting that for sure I'm sick, because now they know you will take medicine, you will take precaution. But when you are still arguing and saying, I am not mad, these people are just putting me here, they are worried. Those doctors
And
at
I'm not drunk.
Ukabika are very, very worried. They said the patient is not improving. The day you tell them that, for sure, I have realized that I am sick, they know you are. And that's how Uganda should be. Uganda should first accept that we have problems. And that's when we can sort out these problems. I started by saying that we have a problem with our systems. Systems just don't work. Because, for example, you go and get a national ID, and they take all your records. The day you go to get a driving permit, you fill the same information. Sometimes even some of us who are not very sure, when your mother was born, you are worried that you may put a wrong date, which you put in the other time. These things are not connected at all. The day you go to get a passport, again you fill the same information. And for me, I thought if we have a country, we have a national data where all our information is gotten. When I'm getting a national ID, when I want a passport, I should just put in a form that I want a passport. They carry the other information on the national ID and just put on this one. They would only give you a provision where they want you to change, whether the other time you said you were single. Have you now married? You had 3 children. Do you now have 4? That's what you would change. But in this country, you can deceive that today I am this, tomorrow I am this. That's why we had a football player who had 3 dates of birth in 3 passports. It was only a coach who discovered. A foreign coach said, but you man, last year you were 23. Now you are saying you are 19. Then how? And the man pulled out the ID. And the guy had 3 passports. There is a player, I will not mention his name. So I want to tell you that there is a problem. You saw how this process started. The first day of census, there was almost nothing. People were striking. The gadgets have not reached. They have not given us appointment letter. The people who had been trained to do the work are not the ones who are now deployed. There was a problem. And you know, for us comrades, we deal with the data every day in our engagement. Data is a very delicate thing. That's why I've told you that data is like a detainee in a torture house. If you torture data, it gives you wrong information. It gives you what you want. So I was also not counted. I was not counted, but...
Who here was counted? Who among you was counted? Ambassador, were you
I was
counted?
counted.
Were you counted?
I instructed the head of
So for
the
me, I was
operation
not counted,
to bring
and
people
many
to-
of
and
my
that's how it
colleagues,
I wasn't. Were
I
you
talked
counted,
to
Major?
them, they were not
No.
counted. So because of those problems, the work was not done properly. That was the first thing. Number 2, what Major calls a conspiracy theory. You see, if you don't conspire, you cannot innovate. You must have some why. This thing is happening because of this. The why leads you to the how, and then you get the other things. For example, did you remember that just before the census, there was a registration of NRM voters? And you know the number that came out?
8 million?
20 million.
20?
18 million.
Yeah, it was 18.
I remember. 18 million people. And people said, the whole of people who voted last year in our last election was 11 million, the ones who voted. But the registered were slightly above that. What has happened in these 5 years that the thing is almost doubling? Do you know the number that Ubos gave the people now who are above 18? It is about that. It is about that. In fact, it is slightly above that.
I'm beginning.
And remember,
I'm sorry. I'm beginning.
remember
to get
there
impressed
are those
actually.
who are still 18, and the ones who are 16,
17
will
yeah.
reach by the time of voting. 16 something or 17 will reach by the time of voting. So, Ubos sometimes is in a catch-22. A certain national process has come up with a certain data. And you have to be very careful. You have to be really very careful when you are releasing your information. If it differs so much from the other one, you bring questions. And you know, we have a president who sometimes even assures these professional people that your thing is wrong. We have a president who is all-knowing. He will tell you this one is wrong, this one is correct. So as I finish, we don't want to look at as a conspiracy theorists, as Major wants to baptize us. But I want to tell
not
you,
us.
Me,
You.
of course, I represent a group of people. I want to argue that, Judith, we don't have time. We would have gone statistics by statistics. You have just only opened us to ethnic statistics. There is statistics of the poor. There is statistics of the people who are eating. There is a statistics of adults, which is very suspicious. Very, very suspicious. For example, you will find that there is some statistics where people are half-half. And when you look at the demographic theory and philosophy, it's not possible. It's not possible that you can have a country where people are half-half. You have young people almost being equal to, for example, look at our death, life expectancy things that were stated, and you look at them very carefully. You look at the number, the percentage of people between 45 and 70, and you look at our life expectancy. I have been discussing this with my demographic friends, and we find that there is a problem. There is a problem here.
Let's take a break now. My crew is telling me it's time for us to take a break. Then we come back and we pick it up from the issue of the demographic aspect of that, what the problem really is. This is Citizens Chat Show. We'll be back after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and thank you for keeping it with us here on the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space TV, streaming on YouTube. My name is Judith Atim, and we're still continuing with our conversation on the flawed census exercise and its findings. Later, we shall also be talking about the ULS expulsion of the Attorney-General and hopefully touch a little bit on the impeachment of the Deputy President of Kenya. Now, before we went to the break, Dr. Ojambo, you were talking about the problems that you see within the demographic that's from the age of 45 and above. Could you just share with us what it is you were saying earlier?
Yeah, I was just giving it as an example. What Major,
in just a minute, please.
Yeah, what Major calls conspiracy. We don't conspire anything. We are looking at statistics.
You and who? You yes, alone. You say I.
No, do I.
And Judith, tell Major that he's not cross-examining me. He may think he's in court. He may think he's in court. When you're looking at these things, we are not joking. This is data that is going to be used for the next 20, 50, 100 years to develop this country. So we need serious, authentic information that we can rely on. We normally tell our students that one of the most authentic organizations is UBOS. So if you are talking about population, you are talking about demography, you are talking about poverty levels, you are talking, if you quote UBOS, we agree with you. And therefore, if UBOS leaders come on TV and tell us that, oh, sorry, we had picked data of 2014 and interchanged it with the one of 2024. Terrible. Terrible, because that is the first stage of analysis. The first stage of analysis, you are just grouping data. Grouping. You are not even into statistics. Now, how will you calculate demographies if you cannot do that properly? How will you calculate poverty levels? How will you calculate life expectancy? How will you calculate those other things if you can misplace small things of ethnic groups? So how do we trust? How do we validate the other data? And therefore, most of the data, for example, Ubos tells us that every 10 people, 10 cannot, they don't know what they are going to eat. They don't know what they are going to eat. And therefore, now, if we move a little step, I think for a country that is not good. That is not good. Okay. So look at that. We want people to look at, if every 10 people, 4 don't know what they are going to eat in a day, that is a big problem. So let's not just look at their fault data, but even what they are showing us creates a lot of worry for if we want to progress. You cannot have 4 people who don't have what to eat and you call yourself a middle-income country.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ojambo. Ambassador, you are also a security expert. You've done a lot of work in the areas of security. Am I correct? Let's, you and of course, I'll also like to learn from the wisdom of Major Awich here. Like Mr. Othieno earlier alluded to the security aspect of flawed data. How problematic exactly could this be to our national security if this data actually falls short, it's subpar?
First of all, I just want to recapitulate on the fact that there are 2 intentional flaws in the outcome of the census. One is that there was a conspiracy, and we're saying we want to debunk that argument because it has not actually carried the day. There are no facts to support it, and as such, we as elite of our communities, we cannot carry on a conversation that is not supported by facts. Secondly, that I think that the issue of which my brother raised about whether this was intentional or it was just an error, and I think the need for investigation is very critical. I want to assert that the fact that I said what I stated, that these people have not made such errors before, until when argument by my brother said of 2014, which I need to know, it doesn't mean that they should go scot-free. Definitely, this is a serious national concern, and it deserves investigations. Was it cyber attacks? Was it to do with the computational errors? Were the statisticians incompetent, and so on? I think this is very important to investigate because it really can carry serious consequences. It can cause a bad perception of government, specifically UBOS, whom, as you said, we actually refer to it a lot as an authority. And if they're in error, then many things can go wrong. And so on. And even depicting wrongly ethnic communities, that is where our identities are conferred. And that is where our safety net is, finally. If you see politicians making noise and they say, we want to partake of the national cake, actually they're talking about ethnicity. Not that we can use it negatively, but we should be able to plow it positively, because that's what we are as African. We are heterogeneous as a country, and we accept that. Those are nations, and you cannot misrepresent them. And the consequences also go down to the administrative units. How much, for example, decentralized resources go to them, it depends on the population numbers. So that means the Navigishu, Acholi, Lango, and Bachiga, and so on, have problems of how much will go to them. this time around until the numbers are corrected. So I did say that I absolve them entirely, but to say they have a very good history, which my brother, the professor, did allude to. Now, the issue of security. You know, security is not just about guns and the boots, but it's about the stability of the mind, the consciousness, and reliability to the data for us to use to plan and be able to execute our national security activities. I don't know if that's what you meant. It is not just about the outcome, but also the processes, because we could just be here dealing with the UBOs, but could be serious attack on the cyber fiber of our country. So it's very important that we take cautious, cautious measures to ensure that there is nothing other than maybe an error on the part of those who are operating the machines. And I want to agree with the issue, those who point out that right from the beginning, at the time of collection of data, there were a lot of mishaps that happened. But counting, in my village, for example, they would ask, how many else do you have in this home, even if, and how many are outside this home? They may be out of the country, you should state them. They're in Kampala, you state them, so that in case they're not captured, they're able to be counted. And of course, there is the system is such that they're able to eliminate duplications, because the birth dates, your NIN number, references, and so on, they can be able to weed out duplicates. So I know that those who were not counted probably were counted by virtue of those who were referring to them when they were counting. If they did not, then definitely that's an error. And in accounting, if those statisticians can tell you, there is always an error of plus minus, and they have an allowance. This doesn't mean that if the rate of those who error of those who are not counted is, if it is huge, then that's a big problem, because why were they not captured? There was another issue that my brother mentioned about those who are counted and not counted, but maybe I hope I'll come to it. But your question was, what does this mean in terms of our security status in the country? If you understate the numbers, for example, the recruitment of our national forces depend on the numbers. We provide quotas. In the past, we would just say, hey, you're a cadre, can you give me some 10? Can you get some number of people in your community or your district? But now, because people are abusing that exercise, that way, that approach, we now use the population quotas, and then we allot the number of people to be recruited, either for police or for the military and other agencies like prisons. So this one has serious consequences. You may have certain populations overrepresented and others underrepresented because of this mishap. And there are so many other things that go with it. World Bank, IMF support this country. UNDP, if they are to follow population quotas, including the overall aggregate numbers, then we can be understated. Come to regional geopolitics. How many people are in each country of EAC partner states? That matters a lot. So I think it is an error that we must check. System error, technical capability errors of the human error, and also the technology itself, the equipment that they have utilized. We must trace back to the manufacturer. Remember when we have say a plane accident, we don't just go to the pilot error, but also the equipment itself, but also go to the manufacturer to come and confirm that everything was okay at the time of the crash, for example. So all these are extremely important, because then it means the country was taken for a ride and that we procured equipment that were not competent. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It certainly does.
Is there any follow-up thing before I exhaust my time? Because my brother got double time, so I need my share.
Okay. Of course, I wanted the issue of identity, the question of identity for the groups that are not disaggregated, 8 million plus bundled up together and categorized as others. And we've seen this in previous reports, and these concerns have been raised time and again, like, why do you put all these groups together? But what does it mean if your identity is taken away from you?
No, that's very serious. And I take it that because you gave extra time to him as a follow-on question, you do the same to me for that.
I'll give you 2 minutes on that.
Because these are fundamental issues. Our ethnic groups, because we're nations under one country, Uganda is not a nation. Uganda is a country with many nations. We're heterogeneous. And so we need to know which nation is perhaps growing fastest, for example, and what are the reasons that are behind that driver. And also we need to know whether they are undergrowing and so on and so forth. And the political gymnastic of electioneering, it borders on ethnicity. And that because it's based on the fact that different communities have different aspirations. And until you marry those aspirations and people have hope for you, that's when they can influence the voting pattern. For example, if I went to among the Adola community, who are not necessarily UPC, but some few members are UPC, we can test to know whether the strength of UPC
we were predominantly UPC for the record.
Yes, yes. By the way, it is true, UPC were predominant even among the Mama Saba. And,
is actually more,
and yes, it was. And I remember even the late Dr. Bote wanted to put the capital city in Bali. And because of the revival of the coffee industry, he was loved a lot. But you see, history is a fact of the past. We can only learn from it. And my brother is a good historian than the professor here because he has learned history a lot and he recites it as if it is a current issue. But that's him. The fact is that ethnicity in Uganda remains a key factor. Identity politics, as long as they're played positively, there is nothing wrong with it. So that's important. Secondly, if we cannot disaggregate statistics, that is a huge problem. Because like he was saying, I think my brother, the historian, was saying, that the albinos were saying Haminawi, PWDs Haminawi, and even age groups. If you misrepresent age groups, for example, now we believe that those below 50% of the population are 17 years. Supposing we're wrong, that's fundamentally flawed. And also the total number, because statistically, when you compute, given the historical developments of our population growth rates, we should be something like, by last year, we're about 48 million. So really for it to come down to that, it is, the difference is too big. So I want to agree with the estimate of the president that it could be not less than 48 million, possibly about 49 to 50 there, yeah, but not less. So I think that the UBOS owes us a lot, explanation, but not just themselves. I think we need an independent check on this, independent experts to go and check, because we don't want to bury anything below the rubble. We must know exactly what happened, what caused it, who can take responsibility for this, because this is a national disaster and we can't take it lightly.
Thank you very much. Joseph, then, or can I skip you?
But I'm not setting the agenda for Joseph. Ask him a different question.
No. We're still, it's a general question that is just going around. But I would still, he could be having further reflections, because he actually started the issue of the security implications of flow data. So, yes.
I mean, just to, okay. So I'll be very brief on this actually.
Be brief.
And always be happy. I recognize that NR is overrepresented here. And they're enjoying it. They forget that their U-boss has made so much heavy blunder that on this panel, 60% of the panelists, members of this panel, were not counted. So that is how disastrous it is. So 3 out of, basically 6 out of 10 not counted. But look, just to broaden the national security element in context, and I'm glad Simon put it the way he did. The significance of this is extraordinary. And I think I genuinely don't think that most of our people understand this. One of the reasons, actually, Judith, why I called the head of UBOS to make sure that I got counted was, amidst everything else, to be an example to particularly younger Ugandans. I was actually willing to advertise the process. That was an important thing, and it absolutely has got to be a political exercise. But that is actually crucially important. For what reason? One, that it is this information that the local authority uses to determine whether or not they're going to open a new school. I know these guys don't open schools, but 50% of it would. It's on the basis of that they determine whether they know how many health facilities they're going to open in particular, say, sub-regions. It is basically that's how they determine whether or not, in case we still had our UPC trains, whether or not you need to add the extra number of train services per area, bus services per area. It's actually that deep, including how much.
Is that an imagination?
It's actually an ideal fact, but of course it doesn't happen at the moment. So Judith, it's extremely important that a national census is applicable. But just to say very quickly, I was also thinking about these things, that amidst all these conversations about the role of the U-boss, I'm actually genuinely surprised, because Simon, you security guys, I actually thought that Uganda is so highly securitized that it would be almost impossible to come up with such kind of error. Meaning that I didn't know that in this country there can be 3 people in Agongera who are not supposed to be there, and you guys don't know. And that we can get it so wrong when part of what actually Robert is saying.
For example, I know where he slept last night.
you guys possibly do that. For political reasons, you possibly do, but I've sort of lost my train on this, but look. I'll defer to
You can rest it there. You can rest it there. You can rest it there.
That was a strategic move to take away your time, but it's okay. We'll give you more time later. Let's hear from
Now, first of all, I like to comment on what a professor always uses, and I think my Congress brother too, as their point of departure. The professor's consistent point of departure is that the situation in the country is bad. Either he uses the word systems.
Yes.
That systems are not working. I think I disagree with that point of departure, because a society is so dynamic to the extent that even if you wanted to create a solution creates a problem. For example, you have a problem of industrialization. You industrialize and you create a problem of pollution. That is what a society is. So when you see emerging challenges, you try to address the issue of Kitezi. You are creating a land for filling dustbin or refuge use, and then it creates a problem. It gets full, and you see, that's what a society is. But when you see the dynamicity of a society, you call it a bad system. No, I repeat, in my experience at the world level, do you know Sweden and Norway, you'd think it's a perfect country. But we had a procedure where we used to preside over states' compliance to international conventions. And one of the procedure was that before I judge Sweden, I call civil society from Sweden to tell us what is in the country. Oh my God, if you hear them talk about Sweden as if the country is dead, meaning that even at whatever level of development you will achieve, challenges are there. Therefore, we should not mistake contemporary challenges with failure of a system.
Well,
yes.
Just hang
Is it the product which is a failure?
Perhaps is it
system?
because that the Swedish or the Nordic citizens have set such high standards for themselves?
That is what I'm saying. It's true. That's what I'm saying. We even developed a system. We develop a system of saying every country will jump a particular bar. If Uganda comes with their level of development, they will jump this bar. When Sweden comes, we heighten the bar, because you are developed, you have technology, you have the money, you have the skill. It is true. So that's what I'm saying, the dynamicity of a society. So every challenge that comes, we shouldn't read it like the system is bad, the system is failed, the system. We want a credible...
Just information, Major. If the system is bad, then the product is bad. I don't want to doubt the professor's proficiency, because he's the product of the systems of NRM. And
No.
So it's bad. Okay.
Since he is very competent, and I don't doubt his competence.
Then the system is competent.
Is competent, yes.
Yes. So these challenges, we should not mistake challenges for.
them hypothesize.
We can't have a system. We can't. The point I'm making is this point of departure of every occurrences manifest a bad system is wrong, and the argument is so diversionary to the extent that it takes us to the same thing. To the extent that even if we are called here to discuss the germination of a bean, we shall resort to how bad is the system, meaning how bad is NRM. Even if we are called to discuss the health of cows, it will take us how bad is the system and how bad is NRM.
And this time education.
I think this is bad. You will respond. You will respond.
No. Information. Judith, this one we are now misleading our.
It is
people,
procedure,
our
yes.
No, you say they will judge.
There is a difference between government and NRM. For example, we vote NRM to form a government, but in a state. So we don't expect, NRM does not own this country. It's not a property of NRM. This is Uganda. So I am talking about Uganda with a combination of NRM, DP, FDC, UPC. That's how it is. In our government, we don't have a government where we have only NRM. We have opposition, we have good people, we have bad people. But I'm talking about Uganda generally. There is nobody in this country who is happy with the system of getting a national ID. If they are there...
So is that NRM?
Okay, thank you.
No, it's okay,
I think he has made this point. I think he has made... I think he has made this point. You see, I have said this, that normally the argument goes and crystallizes. In fact, at one time, not only one time, several occasions, it has called for a change of leadership. Several occasions, not once.
Yes.
You see, that is the illusion that you follow. So I like to inform our viewers that the society is so dynamic that we shall keep getting challenges. Even when you used to, whatever used to correct creates a challenge. And this should not mislead us into a failed system. We are, as a country, on a correct line and things are moving well. So that point of departure, I really want to correct it. Because it will always go around and lead us to the same thing, whether we are called here to discuss a flowering plan, whether we are called here to discuss census, whether we are called here to discuss what. That is so misleading. And some people have seen this, it therefore makes them contextualize an argument that even if you move from one radio station to another and the topic is different, it will say the same thing he said here.
That's it.
The same thing he said here will say in the other radio station, because the mindset is how bad is the system, and therefore by illusion call for a change of leadership. So I rest that there. The society is dynamic. Whatever changes, whatever challenge that occurs as a result of a change. I tell you, even if you wanted to industrialize, you will create pollution. As you fight pollution, something will come up. That is what a society is. Now, I want to talk about security. The impact of a flawed data to security is very grave. First of all, I agree entirely with what Ambassador said, only that I have something to add. I don't want to say like in law that I agree entirely and I have nothing to add. I agree entirely what I said, but I have something to add.
Please go ahead.
I have been talking to Professor Ndebesa. He has always had this concept of non-military security threats. He believes that Uganda has a lot of security threats which are not military in terms.
I agree with you.
In terms. So he has actually asked me, and I've indeed written to the president about requesting Professor Ndebesa to address the National Security Council, which is Article 219 of the Constitution. Article 219 of the Constitution provides for a National Security Council, which is the overall body of security in this country. So Professor Ndebesa has asked that. I want to make a presentation to this because security is being narrowed to military aspects. For example, we are talking of the census in its ethnicity. Professor Ndebesa believes that if we have inequalities in areas of ethnicity, that itself poses insecurity. So, and I've always, I requested the president to allow Professor Debesa to make his presentation, because Karl Marx says, and my professor belongs to the same camp, that Karl Marx says that intelligentsia, the professors, that there are many who talk like prophets in the Old Testament. They just talk, you may think they're critic, but they actually want to tell you the danger. Telling the king of Israel, change from your way of sinning, change from your way. If you don't, God will punish us. So many professors are like that. And therefore, but Karl Marx says if a bigger enemy comes, they fall into the line. But they just won. So I believe it's part of them and Professor Ndebesa. But I warn you that if you get uninformed cadres, they can slaughter you for nothing when you're actually warning. For example, John the Baptist. John the Baptist was such a professor. He was telling the king of Israel, please don't covet your friend's wife. Leave it. When the other young girl danced for her birthday, she danced so well, and the king asked the daughter, what can I give you? So the mother of the girl was such a cadre. She said, go and ask for the head of John the Baptist on a plate. And the girl went and told the father that, Daddy, give me the head of John the Baptist. And the John the Baptist head was brought. And yet, John the Baptist were the kind of professors who just sound warning. Turn away from your way of sinning. Therefore, this data in national security is what Professor Ndebesa means by non-military security threats. And they're hidden there in the data. And therefore, if brought to National Security Council, they need to be addressed. And that's what Professor Ndebesa wanted. Further, to say recruitment, we have gone in a sophisticated area, including recruiting online. We are now like the American system, where, for example, should we find a community like Bamba Saba, who records show that they don't want to join the military, a special program can be designed to go to schools, to go to communities, and present to them the advantages of being in the army and how good it is, that you can join the army, you can even get educated, you go through education in the army, don't mind, can progress, even through the army, you become a professor. So such program would be designed. Now, these data would show us, in the process, we would balance our security through specifically design aspect of recruitment to societies that record has already shown that they are not joining the army. So the non-military aspect really is a big record that data should show, and that is what part of what Professor Ndebesa wanted to present into National Security Council. That while you are looking at possibly ADF who has guns, there are things that are non-military which are actually threatening the unity of this country. Please, can you address it? And that is what most professors do. I don't know whether they are part of them. So Karl Marx says such professors may talk and you even mistake them to be an enemy. And yet when a big enemy comes to threaten, they come back. But they talk to sound warning. Professor Ndebesa really is that, with all honesty and critical facts, and that is. So it really comes to our census, that our census must be correct, because a flawed data, a flawed census may not make us address those non-military security threats.
Well, thank you very much. Let's now move on to the next issue. We're running out of time. It's so we want to talk about the developments of the Uganda Law Society, and of course, in particular, the expulsion of the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and a number of other members of the society. Just a few days ago, on the 14th of October, the ULS, under the newly elected leadership of Isaac Semakade, issued an executive order that actually decided that this group of people would actually be expelled from the party. And he cited a number of accusations, of course, against the Attorney General. And And he said the decision was mainly to safeguard the independence of the legal profession and also to facilitate a forensic investigation into allegations of criminal and professional misconduct by the Attorney General. I don't want to now go into details of so many of the whole executive order, but just a few days, I think on Wednesday evening, there was an X space hosted by the Public Square, moderated by lawyer Ivan Okuda. I was actually playing, I didn't tune in, but I was playing it later on. And Semakade maintained that the core basis for the Attorney General's expulsion from ULS is the doctrine of independence of the legal profession. Gentlemen, you're a member of the bar, you're a member of the Uganda Law Society. I think we are going to start from there again, from that corner. Just a quick, just your thoughts. When you read this executive order as a member of the bar, what were your initial thoughts or reactions that the Attorney General had been expelled from the society?
True, I'm a member of the Uganda Law Society. I'm a practicing advocate with a practicing certificate of 2024. And I did vote. And I still have mark of the voting. The thing was so strong. It is still on my nail up to now.
All right.
I think outrightly, the action of the president is a nullity. I believe it should be taken like he has done nothing. The purported expulsion of the Attorney General and the Solicitor General should be condemned and given the disrespect it deserves. Because Attorney General and Solicitor General is a birth of statute, an act of parliament. Even if the act was so hopeless, you just don't unilaterally decide to act on it. The law provides the membership of that council. And Attorney General and Solicitor General are members by an act of parliament. Now, if all of us were to wake up every day and said, yes, it is provided for in the act, but in my opinion it is wrong and I'm acting, so how would society be? On the contrary, me, I was thinking that Attorney General should actually say he has used this power and dismissed Semakade. And we deploy police there and we see what will happen. Then we control the riot. We see if arbitrary action is okay.
You are
Yes.
engaging the coup.
If arbitrary action, because if he can do it, why not done on him? If it can be done, if he can do it to others, why can't Attorney General also just write a letter and say, by the power on me as Attorney General, I have dismissed you as President of Law Society and I want the deputy to act and deploy police there. When it comes, he cancel and remove his signature. Because the things in the law are just done like that. I would believe that nobody should even know that he has not dismissed an Attorney General. His action is a nullity.
Well, thank you very much for your thoughts, Major. But, well, the rest of us are not members of the... You are a lawmaker?
No.
Okay.
But
so,
I'm a lawmaker.
Okay, you're a lawmaker, but you're not a member of the bar.
No.
Well, so the rest of us are not. But certainly matters... The judiciary certainly exists because we, the people, exist. And they are there to serve us. And so the things that happen, whether it's in the law society or generally the justice, law and order sector, are of a lot of concern for the public. So on that note, I'd like to hear your thoughts. I think, Joseph, let me hear from you. Because this is something that has divided public opinion from both the legal minds and the non-legal minds. Some people think this move is a reflection that the ULS under its current leadership is committed to house cleaning and ensuring that the judiciary as a whole is more accountable and more professional in its work. There's no doubt that over the years we've had so many complaints about the judiciary, whether it's corruption, so much that has actually been going on in there. Your thoughts about his decision?
It was a little bit of a surprise to me. I supported Semakade. I campaigned for him. I know that as a result of my campaigns, he got at least 2 extra votes that he wouldn't have got. Certainly possibly up to 5. But looking at the arguments he's been making from the time of as a candidate and after and including the statements and decision of the expulsion, with the exception of a rather 50-50 persuasive argument made by Comrade Awich about the constitutionality of his move on the 2 ex-officio members, which is an argument made now. All the arguments that he makes are sweepingly obvious, just linked to the conversation we were having much earlier about the depth of the institutions in this country. And when we talk about the depth of the institutions in this country, we're not being partisan, we're basically being responsible citizens, and in any case, actually, with massive evidence that unfortunately this platform, with the limited time that we have, we cannot necessarily sufficiently do so. In a very specific way, for Kiwanuka, yeah, apart from any other Attorney General possible that would replace him, in future, if it's actually suggested that this guy acted in a manner in which he got involved in bribery allegations, corruption allegations, using his office and his law firm to do deals with the state, causing financial loss of 28.8 billion Uganda shillings in compensation, in connection with compensation with not only alleged claimants of land acquired for the Namamve Lozira's transmission line and associated staff. That alone, if true, considering the mess we've just been discussing, there's no reason why Kiwanuka possibly should not be, in this case, expelled as him.
Not as Attorney General.
And possibly not as Attorney General. And perhaps in this case finds himself in Lozira to answer for this financial loss. We can then go ahead and have a debate on whether or not Attorney General should be ex-officio members of the association. And that, I think, that's the matter which I would be leaving possibly to association members, and at the same time to lawyers and indeed legislators. It's an interesting argument. Even I, as a lay person, but as a politician, and as a lawmaker in my own right, I was having that thought. What about if it were a UPC administration tomorrow? And what about the UPC administration the other time when we had Stephen Moding, a Rico, fantastic Attorney General for Uganda People's Congress government at the time? And what are the implications? All these are considerations that you look from a strategic point of view and also from a national interest perspective. The manner in which Kiwanuka behaved around the process of elections, including particularly that combative posture of his that was shown, walking out into the streets of Munyonyo, almost as if we're now in another war zone, either Mukura or somewhere in Kabamba. I think it was very ungentlemanly, considering what lawyers should be. Now, arguably, it had been suggested that Semande manifested and presented another aspect of extremism that was not possibly in tune with land, gentlemen, and women. So, primarily from that perspective, I think I would suggest that Semagadi has a case, and in any case, I'm actually anxious to wait to hear how this goes through. Of course, quite clearly the case that the way Comrade which is saying that very likely that this is something that's going to be challenged, and considering it
is already in court.
It is,
considering
yes.
But yes, in court, but
it will be challenged in court.
Vastly challenged. Whatever it is the case, I just hope that the processes in court are free, open, and in a manner in which the extended arm's hand of the cadreship, including cadre judges, does not make sure that we lose opportunity to have a fair judgment. If you see the extent to which the Kenyan authorities, the Kenyan public services are pushing to make themselves better, pushing us towards the Sweden side. If you look at what is happening, and I don't want to be over-emphatic about it, complaints about the judiciary, complaints that even I have personal interest that I do sometimes, that I go on to it, where you have matters that take 4 years, you have matters that take 5 years. You see very clear impunity, including with judges, land judges, senior judges. Matters go to the highest level of the judiciary, and they're basically either dismissed or disregarded. And so sometimes you say that, well, if some of these things, high-level, high-profile cases, can be manipulated in a manner in which it is, how much is an average Ugandan from Namisindwa going to expect to get justice from Mbale or somewhere in the Sirongo Magistrates Court.
Ambassador, your thoughts?
Well, you see, leadership calls for straightforwardness and accommodation when you're educating on matters of either community interest or even public interest. And that's why you're supposed to observe the principle of being cool-headed and warm-hearted. If you're going to be rushy in your decision-making, then you're bound to make mistakes. The new Law Society president calls himself a rebel lawyer or something. Yes, and he believes that he wants to create and cause changes and moves away from the relics of colonialism, as referred to them, and that wants to create a new order in the society of lawyers. I think, yes, those are very good ideas. Definitely has good ideas, because even want to run away from the wigs that people put on in the legal fraternity, want to move away from certain things which the NRM, for example, managed to cause serious changes. And to me, this kind of behavior is reminiscent of the old governments that overthrew the constitutional order, where MPs went to parliament and formed the new constitution, the pigeonholes, and that's why we call them a pigeonhole constitution, that created a lot of challenges to the history of this country subsequently, and other things. Or Idi Amin just can't overthrow the country the way they did without any participation of the popular participation of the masses. You see, the NRM's overthrow, if we were to call it, was a popular move involving masses, where actually the divide between the Kanzu dress and the combat dress were actually hard to differentiate. This is the kind of thing. Popular move means you are actually trying to respond to popular move. So the question is, did this good counsel, a very unconventional lawyer, find any popularity in his attempts to change, to cause changes? If the answer is yes, where is it? How come there is caused a lot of reprisals that people are now waking up to challenge him? The other one is, you see, these positions are there by virtue of offices. They're not there because of individual people. They're there because of being in those offices. And that membership is based on the constitution of the society, the law society. And those provisions are very clear. Those positions are not there by name, they're there by posts. So did he even just come to look at that? And if so, did he even call for the changes in the constitution before he would implement that? Because any changes like that, a rational actor would base on the necessary modifications or the changes in the constitution before he would act the way he did. But apparently he did not. He did so even without following any institutional establishment within the law society. He did so as an individual, trying to act like he hears of the US presidents. They have issued executive order number 1 or something, and then he thinks it's a style of leadership. So that kind of anarchic act can create anarchy in society. You see, we have to be disciplined, and that's why communities like this are said to be disciplined people. Judges, lawyers, and so on are supposed to be a representation of the most disciplined members of society. So if you're going to act anarchic like some people who are not members of that very disciplined society.
But Ambassador, you can't be disciplined in an environment that requires radical thinking. You give what you receive. If the fraternity actually has issues, then I don't think that is a gentleman's playground anymore. So that would definitely require some radical move, don't you think?
Among the blind, the one-eyed man is a king. If you're also going to act blind because the side is anarchic and you become anarchic, surely, where is the one-eyed person? I think it calls for sobriety for you to act and demonstrate that you are not like those anarchists. Because if you're going to be an anarchist and you're in an anarchic society, then there's nothing but madness.
But those who've been there before him have been as disciplined as you would like to see, but we've not seen, society has not seen much change in that regard.
Right.
In that
You
space.
see, how do you get change? Change is progressive. There are, of course, extremists, there are moderates, and there are conservatives. When you want to occasion change, you have to play ball. If you want to be conservative, then you remain like somebody's UPC forever and ever until Jesus is going to come back. But there are those who say, let's be progressive. And then you have to move, like the revolutionary.
UPC is a progressive political party, by the way.
like the NRM took a very serious revolutionary. But we're methodical. One, we have to change the constitutional order, first and foremost, to gain legitimacy of your actions. And actually, our executive order number 1 was to institute ourselves into power. And then from there, we cause changes. The first thing was to make amendments in the constitution, the constitutional order of this country. And I'm happy to say, I was one of the few people who were popularly elected to discuss and promulgate the Constitution of 1995. And why we did that, because we wanted to occasion orderly changes. And that's how we removed the DC, replaced them with Sigiris, and of course eventually RDCs, and so on and so forth. So what this gentleman should have done.
RDCs have now become DCs.
Yes.
In the interest of time, gentlemen, we need to move.
Yes,
we need
but
to
I'm
move.
just saying that the issue is you must create circumstances that are legitimate around which you can propel your changes. You don't just wake up and change. In other words, you put the cart before the horses and you think you're now acting. Actually, that one cannot be sobriety. It can be given a different description, which I ask my colleague, the lawyer, I mean the professor of
historian.
words.
To give a name.
Okay. Yes, Doctor, please.
Judith, for fear of being caught by time, let me begin with a conclusion. That what is happening in the Uganda Law Society is an absurdity. And unfortunately, the lawyers will have to correct their act. That problem, by the way, some people may think that it is coming with Semakade. I can just take you back in time. In our current history, 3 attorney generals have purportedly been suspended. This now is the 3rd. The first to be suspended was Kidu Makubuya, when he interpreted the law that you can be guilty and not guilty. And that was in 2005, going to 2006 election on Besije, when Besije had a case to answer, and he was supposed to be a candidate. And I remember the Uganda Law Society said, this man here, they did not only suspend him, but even when they were saying that his certificate should be taken away. Following that, they even added on the list of Kidu Makubuya on the interpretations of whether the rebels, the PRA rebel, redemption, something,
People's Redemption Army,
would be tried in the other court thing,
The court martial.
the court martial, and that led to the list being added. On Kidu Makubuya, they added there Kale Kaihura, they added Tunyefunza, and another person. Then the second person to be dismissed or suspended by this under 17 Ndira, when she was the chairperson, was Peter Nyombi. Late Peter Nyombi, may his soul rest in peace. And he was accused various things. The first one was still that case of those rebels, whether they would be tried. And 2, the attack on the courts. And Nyombi was also chased, and Nyombi went to court.
The Black Mamba.
The Black Mamba issue. Nyombi went to court, and the court nullified that the other things were like what Major has said. They didn't have power to suspend him. Now Semakade, unfortunately for Semakade, he has even done it individually. The other one, it would be the law society assembly was the one dismissing.
He said they made the decision as council.
No.
The decision was made as council.
No, there was no assembly. the other two, the assembly would sit and resolve.
Did the council convene?
Yeah, the other two, the other early two,
This
in
this
2000, in 2005, in 2007, in 2013, the assembly sat. This time it was an executive order by the president himself. And I find that, and we need to see what happened to the other ones when they were suspended. Did it materialize? Let me also be materialistic like him.
It was inconsequential.
Did it materialize? It did not. They were inconsequential. They were disrespected. Because there are two things as I end. There are two things. These people are in the Uganda Law Society as their office. But they're also lawyers. Now, the other thing I see with the Uganda Law Society is that they want to put themselves as an arm of judiciary, which is not correct. They are just an association like Teachers Association, Medical Professional Association. And I don't think the Medical Association or the Teacher Association president can dismiss a minister of health. Because in Uganda, and that's what I'm going to end with, suggesting now, because this problem has been there, and it has been because the Law Society feels that the Attorney General, who is supposed to be their colleague, who is the head of the bar, who is supposed to be their colleague, sometimes gives things which sometimes undermines their opinions or understanding of the law. And if you read the story, you find that. So me, I would think, to solve this problem, number one, we need an Attorney General who is a professional. We need an Attorney General, a government officer, who is a professional, like a Solicitor General and other guys, who is not appointed as a minister, and therefore he becomes Attorney General. No. Because the law, this law society think that every Attorney General who comes is propagating the whims of the appointing authority. So that is one of the solutions. The other solution, I think, the lawyers in this country need to come and explain to people the relationship between the Uganda Law Society and the judiciary. Now we have been made to think that Uganda Law Society are supervisors of that judiciary, which is not correct. Because how can a president of the Uganda Law Society suspend Attorney General? In my view, it doesn't make sense. I agree all these complaints are right, but he's doing it the right way. For example, I agree with him.
Right way?
If we have...
Wrong way?
No, he's thinking. He's thinking. If you see the reasoning, there is bias, there is what, there is misinterpretation. For example, recently, the Attorney General gave one interpretation to the Speaker of Parliament. All of us are not lawyers, but we thought it was wrong. The interpretation was basing on comments and which were made by a certain Army General. And he said that, you see, everybody has a right to give his opinion, and you cannot. And I thought that was not correct. And it comes to what you were saying. How do we create anarchy that we are going to respect anybody's opinion? I can't abuse the president in public, and they say, but that is his opinion. So we need decorum. So for me, I think we need to look at this carefully, and we need those who are next to Semakade. They need to advise him. There is no way he's going to succeed with that radical approach of his, because he's dealing with the state. The state has a monopoly of violence.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We should have talked about something else, but in the interest of time, we're not going to talk about that. I do appreciate your contributions very much. So we were supposed to talk about the developments in Kenya regarding the impeachment of the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua. We shall talk about that next time. But the latest that has happened, this is just news that showed up about 30 minutes or so ago. He has not appeared before the Senate. His lawyer has informed the Speaker that he's very, very sick in hospital, and so he cannot attend, although the Speaker had said he should appear before the House by 5 p.m. It's 5:40, so I don't think anything has changed. We'll definitely follow the events that are happening across the border, and hopefully we'll have another conversation about this next time. My name is Judith Atim. Thank you very much to my panelists, Dr. Robert Ojambo, Ambassador Simon Mulongo, Mr. Peter Othieno, last but not least, retired Major Awich. Thank you very much. Joseph Othieno. Why am I calling you Peter for some reason?
Because there's Simon Peter and I'm seated next to Simon.
I don't, okay, sorry, my apologies. But gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your insights. It's been a wonderful conversation. We'll be back next week, same time.
You're
Join us
welcome.
then.
Thank you.